But I saw on the floor where she died. I looked up on the wall and I saw all the bullet holes that came up from the AR-15 rifle after it went through my daughter and killed her and went through the walls. And why nobody else got injured or killed that morning in that apartment building is beyond me. But maybe it wasn't meant to happen.
Stay tuned. Coming up, it's part 2 of a 2-part show where we chronicle the tragic murder of a first responder's daughter and discuss Native American Ojibwe funeral traditions. Hello and welcome to the Situational Awareness Matters Show, episode 377. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. For our regular listeners and viewers, you know that I took a break from podcasting for the last few months. I hit the podcasting scene pretty hard, putting out a new episode every Tuesday for more than 7 years without fail. It will now be my ambition to podcast a little less frequently than I have in the past. But unless you've been faithful to the program for the past 7 years, you have plenty of episodes to go back and listen or watch to keep you busy. Today's feature segment is sponsored by Gassaway Virtual Training. There are 33 online training programs there for you to choose from. Some of the programs are live events presented virtually, and some of them are pre-recorded programs. To learn more, visit samatters.com website and click on the Virtual Training tab. Okay, let's jump into our feature segment, part 2 of my 2-part show where I discuss the tragic murder of a first responder's daughter and discuss Native American Ojibwe funeral traditions. Monte Fronk is a 32-year tribal public safety responder who works for the Mille Band of Ojibwe. Monte oversees tribal emergency management and community risk reduction. Among his many credentials, Monte is a certified tribal emergency manager, tribal EMT, Firefighter 1 and 2. He has hazmat operations. He's a fire instructor, fire officer, public educator, and a member of the Central Minnesota EMS Critical Incident Management Team. Monte has attended the National Fire Academy, the Center for Domestic Preparedness, and the Emergency Management Institute. Monte holds a master's degree from St. Cloud State University in Public Safety Executive Leadership, and he's completed the FBI Leadership Academy. Fire Chief John.Cunningham has over 23 years of experience in public safety field and serves as the Fire Chief and Emergency Management Director for the City of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, a vibrant and diverse community of 81,000 residents. The department handles more than 8,200 calls for service annually, and John is also the president of the Minnesota Fire Chiefs Association. John has a bachelor's degree in business management from Fairfield University and a master's degree in Homeland Security Leadership from the University of Connecticut.
But I saw on the floor where she died. I looked up on the wall and I saw all the bullet holes that came up from the AR-15 rifle after it went through my daughter and killed her and went through the walls. And why nobody else got injured or killed that morning in that apartment building is beyond me. But maybe it wasn't meant to happen. We also know that the individual who killed her, his stuff was also there, but we separated everything out with that. And I took photos for myself, and that's what I needed to do for her. An interesting part of the story is that the person who killed my daughter, his mother wanted his possessions also, and there were stuff that in the apartment. The investigator from Brooklyn Park said, Monte, do you want to notify her because she can't get in the apartment because the lease is in your daughter's name? And I said, I'll call her. You know, and when I got back up and I gave her a call, and she just couldn't believe that I was calling her. I said, I'm Monte. I'm Nita's father, and she was like, I don't know what I can even say or any, you know. And she's just, I said, you don't need to say anything. We both lost our children. Okay, I lost my daughter. You lost your son. What I can tell you is we have got everything bagged up of your son's belongings in her apartment, and you can come and get those, you know, when you want to. And being this happened on Memorial Day weekend, many responders weren't notified, didn't know about it until like the next day or two when they came back from vacation wise. And I got so many text messages calling me just saying I would have been there. I did not know what happened. I came back from my vacation and I found the message with that one. And so many, and I said, I know you would have been there if you would have known. But this is Memorial Day weekend, and I could truly understand that. Then, about a week and a half after her death, Grand Rapids had a paramedic who got killed in the line of duty with an ambulance crash. That paramedic, Troy Bocher, and I graduated high school together. So to honor Troy, I had the honor escorting the ambulance through the Mille reservation, but also going to his funeral too. And so many of our brothers and sisters, again, in fire EMS, came up at that event, and hugs and more tears and condolences and just that anything you need, call me. I don't care if it's 2 a.m, you call. And most of them said, I would have been there for you, Monte. I just didn't know you was there. And I said, I totally get it. So we grieve for Troy, and I grieve for Troy knowing that we were high school classmates together, you know, and all the family in that arena was also coming to me also in this event with that. So looking back, you know, everything for her spiritual journey happened in the right way. Working for Mille this is where it's been an honor of service for almost 32 years working for them, because they were all there. And even when I came back on Tuesday from work, and like, what are you at work for? I'm like, her journey is done. And from about Tuesday to Thursday, it was just every employee was coming up, and again, hugs, condolences. I didn't know I would have came. I said, I know Memorial Day weekend, truly understandable. After the funeral, when we brought her back to our Sheministan community for cemetery, we don't use vaults. We just put the casket right in the ground. And as we drove into our cemetery, we had 2 eagles flying over, which was always a good sign in our community. And that was, you know, the last of it. Luckily, she is right across from my house where I live at, and I can go see her with that one, and which I do. And it's Father's Day was really tough. That was soon after, and that was a very hard Father's Day. And Memorial Day will not mean what Memorial Day means for most people now in my life. I'll be sitting with her at that day when the time comes again for her. Mm-hmm. We will do a feast in a year, one more year for her. But like I say, it's just trying to live life with a different aspect. But looking back, Rich, that I've known you for so long, I've known John for so long, and our brotherhood and sisterhood was there for me in my darkest hour. And we talk about that, but when you're in that moment and you really see it happening, you are so grateful, so humbled that you are in this family as a firefighter, as an EMT, to be there, and that they truly do have your back in your darkest times. And you look back, and I'm still thanking people who, you know, it's kind of in the fog of the moment trying to get through this. Yeah. But most people say it's what we do. And I just I know, but I still want to thank you because I could not have got through this without you.
Yeah. There was one thing that really stuck in my mind, in my heart, that the spiritual leader had said to everyone, and that was that Nada was on a journey to a place of eternal happiness. But she couldn't get there if we stayed sad.
Yep.
It would confuse her.
Yep.
That she needed to look back and see people celebrating her life and not grieving.
Right.
I find that very hard.
Yeah.
That really stuck with me.
And that's very different than what we do for a non-native person. You know, we grieve for a long time, and then you come to our ceremony, Rich, and thank you for being there, Rich, and hearing that. And it's one of the differences that situational awareness is. How do we look at and be culturally competent in coming to a traditional Ojibwe funeral like this? And I always tell my daughter, if I ever went down in the line of duty, this is what you need to do for me. All the things that we would do maybe for a non-responder with ceremonial and bagpipes, no. This is the way I would need to go if something ever happened to me. And that's what I told my responders, if it ever happens, this is the way I need to do my journey.
Yeah. If I can just step back from this story for a moment, there was another incident in Minnesota where 2 wildland firefighters from Michigan were killed in a vehicle crash on their way to a wildland fire somewhere not in Minnesota. They're passing through Minnesota. And John, you played a pretty pivotal role in how the fire service responded to that, not just the emergency, but to those fallen brothers and helping them to get back home. And if we could just pause on Nada's story, I'd like John to share just a little bit of what that was like, because the Minnesota Fire Service really did step up for them, and because you got that 4-day period that they have to be on their journey. So, John, what's tell the story of what happened there with those firefighters?
Yeah, it's I think when I first heard about what happened with Monte and his family, my mind instantly actually flashed back to about 6 years ago when we lost 2 brother firefighters that were just traveling through Minnesota. They're in Blaine. Their vehicle rolled over. There were several injuries, and unfortunately 2 ended up dying. And it really, I think, demonstrated what the Minnesota Fire Service stands for. And it wasn't that long ago that we actually created our own memorial, permanent memorial to honor Minnesota fallen firefighters in the line of duty at the Capitol. There was a memorial, but it was at the baggage claim area in the Minneapolis St. Paul Airport, which you're traveling, you probably saw it there many times.
I think I visited it more than any Minnesota firefighter until they moved it.
We knew there was a handful of people. George Espenson, Ken Perlman, who was a former chief of Brooklyn Park that I took over from when he moved out to Texas, and it was. A lot of things got put into motion, and I remember getting this alert that we lost 2 firefighters, AJ and Jimmy, that were killed, and we really put a lot of effort into ceremonies and protocols and getting it right to make sure that we honored those that died. But this was a little bit different because there was traveling firefighters from out of state traveling through Minnesota, and then we learned pretty quickly that they were Native American, and there was customs that kicked into play. And Monte, I'm reflecting back, and I think you and I have been together, unfortunately, probably more on tragedy and honoring those that have died in the line of duty than just casually sitting down. But you and I have kind of come together, and one of the first phone calls that got made was demonic. It was like, I know that I didn't have the cultural competence to navigate what this meant for their community and also to the fire service community. And Chief Perlman and I got together right away with a handful of other people. And with Monty's leadership, we were able to actually get a meeting with their tribal elders that were on the phone. Remember, a lot of phone conversations because they're in Michigan and they're trying to come down and help arrange things. What ended up happening, which was just an amazing testament, I think, to the fire services, we were able to blend together, the things that we wanted to see done to honor our firefighter fallen brothers. And what that really meant is we were never going to let them alone. That we honestly took it upon ourselves to make sure that we were never going to let them out of our sights until they were home. And that was a commitment that I remember we made because things were kind of in flux. Is Michigan going to come get them? Are we going to get them to the border up in Duluth? Is there going to be a handoff? How are we going to handle the transfer of the bodies with the funeral home? And there was a decision like, you know what? They're ours. We will take care of them like they are our own brothers and our own brothers until they get home on their journey. And that's when we learned about the spiritual journey that happens and just the time frame. Because I remember one of our meetings, we were sitting in there, and I think you were still traveling in and being like, okay, we have some time. We're on the phone with the funeral home. And then I think we then learned, it's like, oh no, we got 4 days to figure this out. And they were still doing autopsies, and we were trying to figure out with the funeral home what was going to transpire. And really, it was honestly, I have to say, it was probably one of the most rewarding experiences in my entire career, because to be exposed to the Ojibwe customs and the tribal customs that I never saw before. Honestly, I think you read some things in a book that only scratch the surface, and we were able to see firsthand and help participate and build the relationships. Because I remember the other thing that I remember you telling me early on, that this is all about relationships and trust. And for our group of chiefs that were here, and I remember Chief Perlman and I standing side by side with you and talking to the tribal elders, and we were there that entire journey. Like, I truly was so honored to be part of something that, a smudging ceremony that they allowed us to be present for and participate in at one of the facilities over in, I think, Coon Rapids, right? So,
and the fact that every family member was driving from Kaniwa Bay to get here, and that's something that we do when we lose somebody. They'll travel. They'll get a couple sandwiches and $5 of gas, and they're going to come. And 50 people were coming from Kaniwa Bay, coming on pretty much fumes. And I was trying to say, we gotta house them, we gotta feed them, because they're all coming here, and they're just driving on whatever they can get in their car, and they're on their way. And then we reached out because we had a U.S. Forest Service liaison, and reached out to the Wildland Firefighters Foundation, and they were absolutely amazing for AJ and Jimmy. They just said, whatever they need, take care of it. So we were able to house all these family members, to feed them, to just be there for them. And then, John's team was, we were going to get them home. And that was the first time in history, which I think we had the longest funeral procession, and to go through 3 states and to bring AJ and Jimmy home within that 4-day journey, and trying to provide some idea of, when we go into Baraga, how Native grieving is going to be seen. And I can remember sitting on the hill when we're getting all our Class A's looking good and everything else. You could hear the degwagan, the drum, waiting for us to bring AJ and Jimmy home. You could hear that way up on the hill. We were in Baraga coming into it, and we got down there. We opened the doors, and people just grieved. And I think we stood at attention for 2.5 hours while every tribal community member grieved. And how we do, we're very open and loud, and then the tribal chair came out, and I can remember going up to him, and that was probably my honor to look at him and speak to him in my Ojibwe language and tell him that we did bring AJ and Jimmy home in those 4 days, and that was what they needed to do. And it was just an amazing effort to do this. Was probably, I think, probably the first in the country to do something like this, because as John said very clearly, they were ours. And I just was a tribal liaison, but their team of leadership just never let AJ and Jimmy, and then to see their names out in Emmitsburg and to get the guide and to see they were given their final honor.
Yeah.
And just knowing that 6 years later, in my darkest hour, that same process was repeated.
Yeah.
And all those gifts of John's and other ones were there for me and doing the same thing in my dark hour.
It's an amazing testament, I think, when we talk about brotherhood and sisterhood that you've mentioned so many times, that honestly, Rich, you cannot define that. I think that people ask me, well, what does that mean?
I think a lot of people say it,
Correct.
but they're not true to it.
I would totally agree with that.
It's just, it's a catch term used widely. And when it comes down to it, I think there's some who live it and some who just talk it. And clear the way I saw at your daughter's funeral, and I wasn't involved in the other incident, but I did go online and do some research where Ken had written a really nice article about that. I mean, that was living it in the most profound way.
Yeah.
I get goosebumps just thinking about that, and the emotion that comes back, and that you mentioned rounding that corner and hearing the drum cadence off in the background. I was in the lead car with the head of the tribal police and driving. That was a long drive. We barely stopped. And when we talk about that they're with us, we actually rented minivans. The fire department rented minivans to transport AJ and Jimmy with our drivers under the escort of the tribal police. And when we rounded that corner, I remember the officer and I were like, stop. We need to get out. And I remember everyone else you were probably the only one that knew what was happening. And we all got out because we could hear it. And we marched that in solo cadence, to their resting spot. And to just be part of that, to your point, you know it when you see it. Some people live it. It's, to us, it's not a catchphrase. This is what we believe. This is the brother sisterhood. This is the family of the fire service. And truly, when you wear this badge or you put that uniform on, it comes with such a huge responsibility that you do have that obligation to drop what you're doing and help your brother or sister out. Because that's what the family is. It's been there for me. It's been there for you, and it's our job to give that to future generations so that they understand what that family means, because it's so powerful.
And in the story we didn't mention was there were several of the hotshot crew of Beartown that were injured and were in the hospitals. And when I got on scene, I went and visited each one of them who was come with conscious, spoken my Ojibwe language. But our service had a firefighter at every one of their doors for 24/7 to show that we're there for them and injured also.
Wow.
And I remember that too, that everyone had posted a firefighter at all those injured hotshot crew doors to show that we care for them.
Wow.
Not only for the living, but also for, unfortunately, the ones who are on the spiritual journey, as AJ and Jimmy was 6 years ago.
Monty, to bring closure to this story, I don't think we could close without talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women, and it's epidemic level. I told you before we started recording that I felt so bad that I didn't know as much about it as I should have known as an active duty fire service leader. So I'm going to give you the chance to educate us about what we need to know and what we should be looking for and how our vigilance and awareness should be heightened. Under what types of circumstances should we be ready to step in and do something when we observe a Native American who is vulnerable?
And really, Rich, this, we've heard about our sisters who were missing in, through history with this one. I mean, look in the news at Canada now with all the boarding schools, and there's 200 and some unmarked graves they're finding, up there. So this has been going on for hundreds of years. But I think it has come more to the light in recent history, where they gave the term now of MMIW, in missing and emergent Indigenous women, and now that my daughter Nada is now also classified as that. And looking at, when we look at situations where we in the fire and EMS service and even emergency management could run into these, I think that we have a unique opportunity to intervene and maybe be that young Native woman's savior or rescuer, because many times we are able to separate them from whoever is controlling them. Because when they're a fire victim, we look at providing care for them on an individual basis. If we're going as an EMS call, again, that ambulance could be that safe haven for them to be at. Emergency management, if we're sheltering or something like that, disaster happens, again, we might have the opportunity that we provide a safety where they can actually reach out. And a lot of times, I think when this movement began, it was only like a law enforcement issue, where now with my daughter, I would think that we in the fire service and EMS emergency management have a much greater opportunity and a much greater sense of service and duty to be able to watch out for this and to be aware, because many of our fire and EMS and emergency management serve tribal communities. They may be off reservation, but they serve them as their PSA areas for fire or EMS service. And that's nationwide sometimes. Many tribes have their own fire and EMS services and law enforcement. But I think with this administration, I think with Deb Haaland as Department of Interior Secretary, which just is an amazing victory for Indian country, and knowing that we now have a dedicated units through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. In fact, Bloomington, Minnesota was one of the very first units, or missing and murdered unit open is in Bloomington, Minnesota with that. So it is very out there. But I always hope that, and I guess for my daughter, the one thing she never got to do, what she wanted to do, was she wanted to get some type of human services degree to help either runaway Native youth or especially other young women who've been human trafficked, and to give back or help them, because with her resilience and a survivor, she's never got to do that. And when I was able to provide testimony on the national MMIW called Lady Justice, the one thing that they went silent on is the fact that I was able to get my daughter recovered alive at 16. And the only reason why is because of our brotherhood and sisterhood. Most times in Indian country, this doesn't happen. That first point of contact may take it or not take it seriously, and it may go nowhere. Mm-hmm. And I just had unique opportunity to be in this service that I could reach out to keep the eyes and ears out, where many Native families don't. Mm-hmm. They're at the mercy of whatever law enforcement agency and lack of resources might be out. And the great television series called Yellowstone with Kevin Costner, mm-hmm. one of the last series episodes was about missing and murdered Indigenous woman. And there was a scene in the beginning of the show where a mother is frantically looking for her daughter, and I hit just like a boulder, because typically that we see, that's what we see, is frantically calling and calling and calling and calling and calling, and nobody knows where she is at, and then until they find, or may never find them. So at the wake and the funeral, as you probably saw, Rich, there was many advocates wearing red dresses. Those are the advocates who, they wear them for missing and murdered Indigenous women, the red skirts. And many of them I know, because when she was being human trafficked, they were also with me. And after the funeral, they approached me and just said, Monte, when you're ready, you need to tell Nate a story. Her death cannot be a check in the box or another statistic. You and your career is unique. And the fact that you are also a Native man, a Native father, which is a rarity in this. Most times with Native mothers, it's aunties who are doing this, and not a Native father. And I guess that's where my journey is now, is to, like tonight. So that situational awareness is not only instant command. Situational awareness also is being out in the field, and even when it's 4 a.m, you might be that Native young woman's hope, because you have situational awareness where you provided a safety spot, and you can ask them, about their safety, and are you being held, whatever questions you may come up with, to ask them. And I think that's where our service comes into play now, which it wasn't as much in the past, but I think we have more of an opportunity, because we get them in a safer location to provide patient care or fire victim services, where we have opportunity to maybe be there when they do say, this is not, I need help. And we can be there for them, and maybe be that hope to keep them safe, and hopefully bring them back home to their mothers, to all these families that have been wondering, will they ever find them alive.
Well, I remember in the days following her funeral, we connected by phone, and it's always awkward. You don't know what to say. And really, we talked a little bit at the funeral, but when we were talking on the phone, and we spent some time there, and I was trying to think, what could I offer? What could I offer? I mean, I got nothing, and the only thing I could think to offer was to give you this platform to tell her story, and I even felt awkward about offering that, because it's can be a very private story that maybe families don't want told. And when you agreed to do that, one, I breathed a sigh of relief that I had not stepped over some boundary of being inconsiderate. But I thought, I couldn't think of anything else that I could offer that would be maybe more valuable to prevent future potential tragedies like this, or even to help firefighter families through tragedies like this, than to have you tell this story, if you would be willing to tell the story. And John, your contribution toward the things that you guys did for Beartown, and your connection with Monte was really a powerful add to this, and I'm glad you were able to. And
just the fact that this was in his jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And myself, knowing John as much as I have, I was glad it was somebody who I knew, who she was in good hands. And that was an honor, to realize that I knew you, I knew that her death in your jurisdiction, for how tragic it was, I knew that she was in good hands, and you're going to be there for me. And that was, because like I say, in large areas, you may not always know the victims when these happen, and And then, as you said to John, I think at one time you said once you found out, you just couldn't. It can't be.
Yeah.
You know, and
I mean, it goes to we take care of one another.
Yeah.
We always will. We're always here. I'm always here for you. I know that. And I think, you know, to that point on using her death to educate and to hopefully prevent this from happening again. I mean, when I first heard that, my first thought is, how could that be here? Because you're not next door. You know, I mean, that's you and I get to see each other, but you know, it's a couple hour drive, and I was, how could this be in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota? That was honestly one of my first thoughts. And if you think it can't happen in your backyard, it can. And I think to your strength and to your point about giving our first responders the tools to look out for, because this is that epidemic that is impacting so many Indigenous women that I didn't know about until this happened, and I started to read up and just how prevalent it is. And I mean, we had the you know, from everything that's happening, you know, when we had the Super Bowl, I remember you know, human trafficking and that being a huge concern amongst security officials, and I couldn't wrap my head around it, and then it really brought it home, and then really I thank you for telling me that story. I think for both of us of opening up your heart that how we can help, you know, other women, you know, get out of those situations,
or just knowing that we're there for them also.
Yep.
Because, like I say, you hear this term, and you just can't always put your hands on it until somebody who you know, who's just a brother and sister in the fire service, is a father of one. And the only reason that she had a good life for 24 years, lots of trauma. And when we look back, when we were doing certain things with her mother and I both looked at each other at one moment. We said, we knew this could happen, because being as strong as a survivor she was, the trauma that she carried within her, we knew would go take her to dark places again, because it's just. But she lived it as resilient as she could, and lived life as wonderful as she could, and I got 24 wonderful years to be with her, and like I say, and to, you know, and now to lose her, but I know spiritually, everything was done as we want to do a 44-day journey. All the support I've gotten was gotten me through this, Rich, and all of you who attended her wake and funeral. It's just a gift, because you just hope somebody shows up besides your immediate family, and look back and every seat was pretty much full, and it was
quite stirring to see so many people come together for that. John, I want to thank you for being here with us tonight. Monty, your courage leaves me in awe. I don't think if I were the person telling the story that I could keep myself composed enough to tell a story that somebody would want to sit and listen to. And your description of everything from the event through the funeral to your advice was amazing, and I am so glad we got the chance to sit down and have this conversation, and for you to agree to have it recorded and shared, and it will live in perpetuity for so long as I live. My podcasts and YouTube will be there for people to watch, and I hope they'll share with others and share with others, and you know, that the story grows as a result of the gift that you have given,
and so also the death of my daughter, because it's again to be to those advocates who said, don't let her death be a check in the box. And I know her Ojibwe name, she'd want her passion to help others continue. And I guess that is what my journey is now as a father of an MMIW victim. Rich, if others in your audience would want to get a hold of me,
I'll put your contact information in the show notes, and so that they would need to reach out to you. And John, I'll put put your contact information in the show notes. I'll put some information about the MMIW website in there, and I'm also going to put a link to the Patty Wetterling Foundation. I hadn't made a note of that until you talked about it, and then
it's changed a lot since Patty retired. But at the time in that one, an amazing woman to get me through those dark times, and with that, and so Rich, I thank you for, and both John. I mean, the support in this dark time. And I could not have gone through this. And the fact that what Greg Hayes did with Minnewacan and all the pallbearers who came up and were there, if I had to make all those arrangements and the food, I could have not gone through this. And I will say that many people have asked me, well, didn't you want justice? And like, what do you mean? Well, didn't you want the person convicted and sent to prison? And I said, it's done. I said, my daughter's dead. His name was Darnell, committed suicide. I said, right now in the metro area, we have 4 to 5 families with children which are dead by drive-by shootings who have no answers and may never have an answer. Mm-hmm. I have my answer. And his side is grieving and went through this process, and mine, but if I had no answers, Rich, you and I have been talking a whole lot more, and John too, to get me through this. Mm-hmm. But it was a done situation where I'm not sitting there as a Native father, will I ever have an answer? I do. And that's, you want to call it a gift or an ending, but it's done on that aspect, which for sad it is, but it is a concluded event.
Rich, I'd encourage people to learn more, not only about this, but about the cultures that have been so powerful.
Really an enriching experience for me. I mean, we've known each other for a long time, and we've rarely had any discussions. Our discussions are all about fire EMS and leadership topics and everything related to classes and stuff, but we've never really had any discussion whatsoever, that relates to your culture. And this was just such an amazing.
And sometimes I told a lot of responders who attended, that especially for the EMS calls, I said, sometimes we are the keepers of that family's needed information when they are grieving, and I always tell them, please come to our wakes, because if you can provide that family situation awareness of what happened with their loved one, how you provided excellent EMS care, and the outcome just wasn't there. They are so grateful, especially if they were not there or far away. And all they know is they got a call that their loved one has passed, and they're at their wake, and you can see that they're just sitting there grieving with no answers. And yet you are there as that agency who has it. Yeah. And to go there and say, I was on the fire squad, I was on the EMS crew that was there. It was such an honor to be of service to your family. Is there anything that you would like to know about what happened? And it's just sometimes amazing, and you can, if they say yes and provided what you can, what an amazing gift that you provided this family who's going through this same spiritual journey I've been through, and now they know the whole situational awareness picture of all the care you did, and all those woulda, coulda, shoulda questions are now answered, and they can allow that 4-day process to happen also.
Yeah. That's great advice. Great advice. Okay, thank you both, and I can't wait to get the episode up and shared with people.
You know, and as we say in our world, there's no word for goodbye in Ojibwe. We say "Giba wabanan," which means we'll see you later, Rich.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you to Monte Fronk and Fire Chief John.Cunningham for sharing your story with us today. Remember, this is part 2 of a 2-part show, so if you missed last week's show, you might want to swing back and give it a listen or review. Since the start of the pandemic, I've had some amazing opportunities to present my programs on a virtual platform for groups ranging in size from 6 to 400, with recorded playbacks being viewed over 29,000 times. Here's hoping the new COVID variants don't shut things down again, and we return to some form of normalcy. Thank you to the organizations that have hosted live situational awareness programs since our last episode aired. That includes the Minnesota Board of Firefighter Training and Education, the Fire Chiefs Association of British Columbia, the Clark County Fire Protection District No. 6 in Vancouver, Washington, the Spring Fire Department in Spring, Texas, Fire Rescue International in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine. A special thanks to all the organizations that have allowed me to offer your members virtual training. If you're interested in hosting a live event or a virtual program, just click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the samatters.com homepage, and I'll give you a call. Finally, remember to check the show notes for how to subscribe to our newsletter and how to follow us on social media. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 377 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to our guests for sharing your difficult story of tragedy, and thank you to our viewers and listeners for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters show with Dr. Richard Gasaway. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit his website, samatters.com. If you're interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for a program, or if you would like to be a guest on his show, click the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage.